Greetings all, this is Hairy Nick and welcome back to the X-Wing 1st Edition Summer of Jank, a short series where we're going to go through a bunch of the X-Wing 1st Edition you guys have submitted over the past several months and focus mainly on things that use some more unconventional list building tactics and various elements that may or may not be transitioning into 2nd Edition, and discuss the implication of how these game elements are going to be moving forward after 2nd Edition drops. And before we dive into these, I just want to mention, yes, you're more than welcome to drop any of your lists you want to discuss in the comment section below. Just be aware that I do have a large backlog of lists that I am working through for these videos, and I'm not going to focus so much on newer lists being submitted. Once again, we'll be taking a look at one list from each of the three factions, and this first one is by Tor Luminator for the Scum faction. We have two Kimagila fighters and Fen Rao in the Protectorate Starfighter. The Kimagilas, Tarani Calder and Dalen Oberos, both have veteran instincts, harpoon missiles, unhinged astromechs, contraband cybernetics, and guidance ships. And Fen Rao has a pretty standard build with push to limits, auto thrusters, and Concord Dawn Protector. And I wanted to make sure I piloted at least one of these lists that use Kimagila fighters because I think it's a really cool ship. I just get the impression it was somewhat overshadowed by the release of the TIE Silencer and the Sheathipede. It was never really going to shine in a wave where those were released, but it's still a cool ship nonetheless. Tarani's and Dalen Oberos' ability both rely on them having opponent ships inside their bullseye firing arc. And right off the bat, Veteran Instincts and Unhinged Astromech seems like a very good choice for them. Unhinged making sure they have a bit more green on their dial, and Veteran Instincts making sure they're going to fly as late as possible. It's going to make sure that lining up ships in that bullseye firing arc is going to be more possible, and even in the situation where your opponent's flying high pilot school aces, say some PS11 Fens or whatever, it still offers your ships a bit of flexibility, so at the very least you may have to force your opponent to use boosts or barrel rolls just to get out of that bullseye firing arc, and that feels worth it alone. Also, yes, both of these ships do make a strong case to take harpoon missiles, and having them both being Alpha Strikers makes a lot of sense. With guidance ships and their already quite aggressive pilot abilities, this is going to mean you can put a lot of damage on the table, and yes, it may put a bit of a target on them, but it also works well alongside Fen Rao, because Fen Rao is a ship that doesn't want to be taken off the board early in the game, but neither do Alpha Strikers, and this means you can get a lot of value early game, while Fen Rao can stick around for the long game and hopefully finish your opponent off. So it does seem like a very well-rounded list, and yes, I love the inclusion of Contraband Cybernetics. It's one of my favourite upgrades to come out in the last wave. It's just a really cool, fun thing, and I'm really happy to see it make it into 2nd Edition as well. Also, Tor, yes, you mentioned you took this to the regionals and you went 3-3. That's a really good effort, dude. Going 3-3 to regionals is no mean feat, and I think this makes a lot of sense. I think, unfortunately, Scum didn't get many competitive things to round out the game, and we're pretty much ending up the 1st Edition X-Wing meta, with Scum firmly on the bottom in terms of faction rank, but the Kimagila fighters nonetheless is not a ship to be overlooked. Alright, next up we have Rebel Aces by Brian T. This is Wedge Antilles, Poe Dameron, and Fen Rao in the Sheathipede Shuttle. Wedge Antilles has Veteran Instincts, Integrated Astromech, and Flight Assist Astromech. Poe Dameron at PS9 has Veteran Instincts, BB-8, Advanced Optics, Auto Thrusters and Black 1, and Fen Rao has VI, Weapons Engineered, and M9G8. And before we continue, this list was submitted several months ago before we had all the details for the new X-Wing fix. So before we move on, let's just bring it up on the screen here. Yes, Renegade Refit and Servomotor S-Foils obviously would go on Wedge Antilles had Brian known that those options would be available down the track. And more to the point, these actually managed to strip 3 points off the list. And that means you have a lot more flexibility to change around what could be done. Right off the bat, I think the obvious choice to spend those points, if indeed you do want to spend the points, is to upgrade that Flight Assist Astromech to R2-D2, bringing the list back to 99 points, but I think that feels worth it. You could also consider putting R2-D2 on Poe Dameron and putting BB-8 on Wedge Antilles. On the closed side of the Servomotor S-Foils card, you do get to put a bit more green on the dial, which does give you a bit more flexibility with BB-8, and that could be a cool option. But nevertheless, fix or not, I do like the thinking behind this list, because it kind of falls into that classic 2 aces and a support chip role. We've seen it heavily played in the Imperials, obviously with Palpatine. It saw a bit of play with the Scum faction with Manaru, and the Sheath of Peace shuttle seems like a good candidate for this kind of archetype. It's also worth noting that yes, obviously we can't do this moving forward into 2nd edition, because Poe Dameron and Wedge Antilles will no longer be on the same faction, seeing as how the Resistance will be made its own faction. So if you want to play around with this concept, yep, now is absolutely the time to do it. And before these X-Wing fixes dropped, I would have said this is an interesting list, maybe a bit more casual than competitive, but now Wedge Antilles has servomotor S-foils and Renegade refit at a very nice, affordable cost. I actually think this is verging on competitive. I really like Wedge Antilles, I always did. I think that pilot ability is fantastic. It was just a bit overcosted, the frame was a bit underperforming. But with all of these new upgrade cards, I think it does have a serious shot. Fly Assist Astromech, even if you don't upgrade to R2-D2, I do think it's a fantastic card. It is worth noting, however, that Wedge Antilles, yes, is a PS9. If you fly him aggressively, it's rarely going to be a case where Flight Assist Astromech activates. But I guess in the same time, it is useful to have that as an aggressive option. Just be aware you can't use it to arc dodge. Not very effectively anyway. Fenn and Poe both have a very standard build on them. Poe Dameron usually likes to take R2-D2, but I do like BB-8. I always think it's a bit more of a fun option. Auto thrusters as well means you do get a bit more value out of repositioning, which is kind of cool. You could always save the points on auto thrusters and go to integrated astromech, and that really does free up the option to take some more expensive astromechs. But all in all, I think all of these upgrades are seriously performing. I love that all 3 of these ships are at a PS11, and I think overall this seems like a nice cohesive list. And Brian, if you get the shot, give this a go, because I think with the new X-Wing upgrade cards, this could be seriously competitive. And lastly, we have Blackouts Eclipse by Bronze Sparrow at 95 points. This has Kylo Ren in the Upsilon class shuttle and test pilot Blackout in the TIE Silencer. Kylo has marksmanship, fire control systems, Ivan Assad, gunner, pattern analyzer, advanced optics and tactical jammer, and Kylo Ren shuttle. And Blackout has trick shot, fire control systems, threat tracker, auto thrusters, and the First Order Vanguard title. And this list puts forward a bit of an interesting thought experiment. The TIE Silencer moving in 2nd edition will no longer be able to fly alongside the Decimator. It's a case of the First Order no longer has access to that one big, expensive, roughly 60-ish point ship that kind of flies well alongside a lot of its aces, or you could look at it as the Empire no longer has access to the First Order aces. And that list archetype was kind of relying on that. For a while there, we were seeing a lot of Decimator and Quick Draw builds making a lot of tournaments, so it'll be interesting to see whether the game elements moving into 2nd edition is going to allow for that kind of archetype, but I think it's going to mean more ships are going to have to come out before we revisit that. Indeed, we have the Epsilon class shuttle here alongside the TIE Silencer, and I think the Epsilon class shuttle is just a bit over bloated in this build. I do like what's going on, I just think that for the points investment, this is not quite as efficient as we'd like to see it. Nothing strikes me as really underpowered. I mean, Kylo Ren's shuttle is always this very weird kind of stress control card. I've never really loved it, and I don't think we're going to see this design moving forward in 2nd edition for 2 reasons. One is incidental stress is going to mean it's a lot easier to just blank this card out, and 2, it's just way too complicated. I never understood why FFG wanted to have this. You get to choose another ship at range 1 to 2 of the Upsilon class shuttle. It was kind of a weird, your opponent had to choose a ship next to your ship. It's the card that you always have to read a couple of times when you're using it, because it is just a little bit too complicated, and I don't think it's clean enough to make it into 2nd edition. If they got rid of that ability to make your opponent choose another ship at range 1 to 2 of your ship, I think this card would be simple enough to just transition the way it is. But let's be frank, what's going on here is you still have a 5-point bid and lots of points to spend, and we've spent a lot of points on cards that are, well, good. They're going to have a lot of games where they work, but I doubt that all of these cylinders are going to be firing at the same time, if you catch my drift. Marksmanship, Ivan Assad, and Pattern Analyzer alongside each other doesn't seem like we're really leaning into much upgrade symbiosis. Because if we're using Pattern Analyzer to activate marksmanship, it means that our ship is stressed and we cannot get that free evade token. Remember, free actions still require you to not be stressed unless you have an upgrade card that otherwise says you can take that action while stressed. And I like the thinking behind marksmanship. I mean, obviously, yes, it's a 4-dice ship. We have fire control systems and gunner. You're going to see a lot of red dice, so you're going to see a lot of focus results on your dice. I can see what's going on there. But it relies on you being able to take an action. And if you take an action, you can't coordinate. And coordinate is a super important thing alongside Blackout. You want to give him as much flexibility as possible. If you spend 40 points on an ace, you really want to make sure it has as much flexibility as possible so he doesn't get outflown. And for that reason, I'd actually take out marksmanship and put in expertise. Now, yes, I know, expertise gets shut down when your ship is stressed. Nonetheless, I just don't think marksmanship is efficient enough. I actually really like the design of the 2nd edition marksmanship moving forward. A lot of these EPTs that use actions often just underperform a bit, especially the older ones. And expertise is just efficient enough to say, hey, look, sometimes it's not going to work. You're going to have to do a full stop. You're going to have to stress your ship. But the times it does work, you're going to see a lot of red dice and you're going to get a lot of efficiency out of it. Plus, if you're not stressing yourself, Ivan Assad also works, and that's fantastic. And from that point of view, you might want to not think about Pattern Analyzer, but I think I would still keep it on because the ship is still going to stress itself nonetheless. It's something you just kind of can't get around. And it's one reason why I don't love this build because, again, not all of these upgrades are working together. We're trying to use up these points as best possible. But when you invest this much into a shuttle, you have to sort of start to look at upgrades that just won't work all the time. And that's when a ship sort of becomes overbloated and underperforming. But yes, obviously moving forward, if you want to build a ship around about this points cost, like the 55 plus points range, you don't have a lot of options. And I'm hoping that First Order does get something like this to fly alongside the TIE Silencer. I don't know what that's going to be, but I think there is definitely a void to fill there. And if you do want to invest this many points in an Upsilon class shuttle, I think this is a good approach. Test Pilot Blackout, yep, there's not much to say about this. I like this list a lot. Trickshot is not my preferred upgrade on Test Pilot Blackout. I think I would rather have VI. Trickshot works well with the pilot ability, but it's going to be such a salty thing for you to have when your opponent has PS8s and PS9s, Inquisitors, Fenrau, Kylo Ren, Sunterfell, Vader. All of those pilots are going to run rings around Blackout, and it's going to be a real feel-bad moment. If you have VI, you're at PS9, you're competing with these other ships. I will say the advantage with Trickshot is you can take a target lock in anticipation of your opponent's ship flying after Blackout, and that means you get the opportunity to activate your threat tracker, maybe barrel roll out of their arc when they try and shoot you, and that could be good. Obviously, your opponent could try and outfly that, but it is a bit of versatility you could have. And there is the slight opportunity as well that the threat tracker could potentially fly you behind a rock, give you an extra green dice and an extra red dice, which could be quite cool. I can see the logic behind using Trickshot in that scenario. I just like VI a little bit more on Blackout. At the end of the day, I think I have to prefer consistency over symbiosis in this build. I like the thinking behind this list, I just don't think all the pieces are there just yet. Anyway, that's the 3 lists we're going to have a take a look at this week. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Hopefully by the time I'm going to make another one of these videos, we have a few more spoilers to talk about. Bit sad we didn't see them this morning, but I'm sure we'll see some more in a few days. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe. Like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter and Reddit, and I will catch you guys later.